So, hello. Thank you very much for coming in and doing this interview. I'm very excited.
Thank you.
Your father, Malek Bahar, and I hope I was close enough.
Yeah, okay.
I'm very sorry, but he is the most famous poet in Iran of the 20th century.
That's right.
And even having this title, the Prince of Poets, was something that had not been given since the 14th century?
No, not the title, but many scholars believe that probably he was the greatest since 14th century.
The greatest.
To a country that poetry is really very important, not only he is the most important, but also they believe since 14th century.
Since the 14th century. Yeah. And up to this day, there has not been another poet in Iran and Persian history, modern history, to surpass your father.
No. And no one had that title at all, never given to anybody else.
Never again.
No. He was probably the last icon of the classical poetry.
He was considered a neoclassicist.
Yes.
And what defines his poetry as neoclassicism?
The style. The style was neoclassical, but the subject matter was extremely modern and also going to continue to be. Living is the human condition and humanity and the beauty of our earth. I mean, anything that you can think of as being humanist, he was.
Yes. And your father was very much involved in the peace movement in Iran and in inequality in Iran. And as a result, he was subjected to exile, imprisonment. Your family was forced to live in poverty, destitution. And yet at the same time, he is so revered by the people of Iran. How is it possible for someone to be so respected by the people of his country and yet he faced so much suppression, oppression during his lifetime?
Because Iran never was a democracy. It was a dictatorship. And if you never lived under dictatorship, maybe that question would never come. But when you live under dictatorship, to be loved by people and not loved by the authorities, two different things. Because they have the money and they have the gun and they have a control under dictatorship, any kind of dictatorship. And my father was against dictatorship. My father was for democracy. He was a revolutionary man of human dignity and freedom. Everyone must have. But of course, the dictators never liked his words because he was loved by people, but the people didn't have much choice, that turn against the government. When they did turn against the government finally, then it was Islamic Republic took place. But the dictatorship is very different than what the people love you or not love you. He was loved by people. He is still loved, and I think he is going to continue to be loved by the Iranian people, and also as we started introducing him to American in English language, probably they will see that his word is never going to be out of date.
Right. Yes, and you in the book you make a mention of how it is for a poet to be feared by the government. You said that in a country where poets are allowed to starve, where poets are thrown into jail and their families are persecuted, is a country where a government that fears the truth that poets write. That seems to really play into what you were saying just now. Let me just put that up. In terms of the dichotomy or the juxtaposition between power and people, and the power of the people.
Absolutely. Dictatorship means that. It's the rule of one, or the rule of one class. that feed in to the one person and one ruler. So anything against that, against humanity or the freedom of people or freedom of women or freedom of press, means that you should shut your mouth. Okay, if you don't shut your mouth, there is a way to take care of it. They kill you, which they tried to kill my father, but they killed somebody else that looked like him, the journalist, and then they put him in jail to be quiet. But they really crushed probably his physical body, but never his soul. He never sold his soul to anyone. And he was defiant of dictatorship till the last breath.
And talking about your father's ideas of equality of women, and you mentioned the chador, and with the Islamic Republic, the revolution, with the Ayatollah Khomeini coming into power, was originally, it sounded like, while it was coming in as a theocratic government or way of leading, it didn't seem like people anticipated the strictness of the enforcement of the law, the women having to wear the chador, the entire covering of their body, and everybody wearing black, as you described when you came back for the first time. After that, did people anticipate that it would be that extreme from what it had been?
I don't think so. But you know, there are things that when you, as a leader in a country, don't allow the political parties develop, the people only learn to live under dictatorship that's been told, and they follow that. Therefore, when the Shah fell, the revolution came, and it was really true revolution. But there was no leadership, there was no parties, there was no political structure. You know, Turkey and Iran, the same time, they have Ataturk, and I had Reza Shah, the father of the last Shah. But Ataturk in Turkey never married, lived alone in one room of one of the palaces of Ottoman Empire, and allowed Turkish people to learn to have political parties, debate each other, no dictatorship. That in Iran has not been developed. It was ruler of one man and one man alone. So when the revolution came, when there is no political parties and there is no leadership, the only one that they went under, they were religious leadership, because they have a structure. They have their own bishop, the cardinal, and going up and up and up till Ayatollah. So they took over because they had the structure and there was nothing else. And fortunately, a country was very ready for democracy, but because of the lack of the political parties, that the people went under the Ayatollah. No, they didn't know. Of course they didn't know.
And so, as we were talking about the poetry and being able to hear the original, would it be possible if maybe we could have you read an excerpt of his most famous, the Morghe Sahar? Just maybe a paragraph or anything.
I can read something else,
yes.
Which is
okay.
probably similar. I'm going to read something about women, actually.
Oh,
that long time ago, you know, he wrote, and you can then say, yes, Azan, because they're talking to you, women, you know, and let me get my glasses.
As I said before we started the interview,
I think this shows that man was feminist. I mean, it's 60 years ago he died. And then as a young man, how in the world he was feminist? I mean, this is really something. I think is unbelievable that he was thinking that way. Let me read that, and then she's going to read that. Just an expert, not a whole poem, it's a big poem. جوان بخت و جهان آرای ای زن، جمال و زینت دنیای ای زن. صدف خانه است و صاحب خانه غواست و در وی گوهر یکتای ای زن. تو یکتا گوهری در درج خانه وزان بهتر که گوهرزای ای زن. تو در عین لطافت زورمندی، تو هم گوهر تو هم دریای ای زن. چو مغز اندر سر و چون هوش در مغز، به جا و لایق و شایانی ای زن. دریغا گر تو با این هوش و ادراک، به جهل از این فزونتر پایی ای زن. دریغا کز حساب خود وطن را به نیمه تن فلج فرمایی ای زن.
Clearly, I can't reproduce that repetitive note there. The poem is called A Woman, and it is very modern and feminist. You are at once both delicate and strong, both the oyster's pearl and its nurturing sea. You are blessed with a keen intelligence and know full well the power of your mind. You are both architect and mason, building happiness in the world. When men are blind to women's strengths, blind to their worth, society is crippled. How sad. For where women are paralyzed, so too is the culture.
Very beautiful. Which this was also a question that I had written down here, but I didn't know if we had enough time for it, which was really your father, if he were alive, what kind of advice or what kind of message would he give to people, not just in Iran, not just in the United States, but all over the world who are feeling injustice and who are standing up, and maybe for the first time standing up and not understanding necessarily what it is that is causing them to be upset, but they know that they must take to the streets and make their voice heard. What do you think your father would say?
Well, he would just say what he did himself. I mean, his life is a great, we just brought it here, that what kind of a life he had. He never gave up, never give up. And actually, one woman asked me in one of the book signing, she said, the only thing that I really impressed me more than anything else, you never gave up. And I said, that's true. Don't give up. My message to all our oppressed people who are under dictatorship, injustices, whether injustice is a government or your husband or your son or your neighbor or whoever, stand up for your right. And doesn't matter. You get killed. Don't be scared. Just stand up and fight. And fight. To women, educate yourself and fight. To the black, don't believe anything what they tell you. You are just as good as they are. This is his message.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.